First contact gone wrong. The mining freighter Stardust crane drifted slowly through the asteroid field near the Kepler belt. It was an old ship, covered in scratches and burn marks from years of hard work. The vessel was not pretty, but it was strong. It had survived countless trips through dangerous space, and its captain intended to keep it that way. Park Gina sat in the captain's chair, her feet resting on the console in front of her. She was 34 years old, with short black hair and tired eyes that had seen too much. Before becoming a civilian hauler, she had served 10 years in the Earth Defense Fleet. She had left that life behind for something quieter. Mining asteroids was boring work, but boring meant safe. Boring meant coming home. "Captain, we have a problem," said Kim Do-yoon from the engineering station behind her. Jina did not move. "What kind of problem?" "The kind that has weapons pointed at us." Gina dropped her feet and looked at the main screen. Her blood went cold. A massive ship had appeared from behind a nearby asteroid. It was unlike anything she had ever seen. The vessel was smooth and silver, shaped like a curved blade. Strange lights pulsed along its surface. It was beautiful in a terrifying way, like a predator showing its teeth. "That's not human," Do-hyun whispered. "No," Gina agreed. "It's not." The communication system crackled to life. A voice spoke in perfect but strange-sounding Korean. The translation must have been automatic. "Attention, primitive vessel. You are now property of the Valoran Empire. Power down your engines and prepare to be boarded. Resistance will result in immediate termination. You have 2 minutes to comply." Gina stared at the screen. Her heart was beating fast, but her face showed nothing. She had trained herself long ago to hide her fear. Fear was useless. Fear got people killed. "Do-hyun," she said calmly. "Yes, Captain?" "How long would it take you to reroute the mining laser to the forward array?" Do-hyun was quiet for a moment. Then he laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You want to fight that thing with a mining laser? I want options." "How long?" Do-hyun looked at his console, his fingers moving quickly over the controls. 4 minutes. Maybe 5. Make it 4. Gina opened a channel to the alien ship. She kept her voice steady and polite. "Valoran vessel, this is Captain Park Gina of the Stardust crane. We are a civilian mining ship. We carry no weapons and no valuable cargo. Surely there has been some mistake." The alien voice responded with what sounded like amusement. "There is no mistake. All ships in this sector are now Valoran property. All crews will be processed. This is not a negotiation. You have 1 minute and 30 seconds remaining." Gina muted the channel and looked back at Do-hyun. "How are we doing?" "I need more time. Then I'll get you more time." She opened the channel again. "Valoran vessel, I must inform you that our ship's computer has a security lock that requires a specific code sequence to disable. If you board us without the code, the engines will overload. We will all die. I am willing to provide the code, but I need time to retrieve it from our secure database." This was a complete lie. The Stardust crane had no such system. But Gina was betting that the aliens did not know that. There was a pause. Then the alien voice spoke again, sounding slightly annoyed. "You have 3 additional minutes. Do not attempt to flee. Our weapons are locked on your vessel." Gina muted the channel again. "Do-hyun? Almost there. 1 more minute." Gina watched the alien ship on her screen. It hung in space like a silver ghost, waiting. She wondered how many ships it had captured before. How many crews had surrendered without a fight? How many people had been processed, whatever that meant? She thought about her crew. There were only 6 people on the Stardust crane. Do-hyun, Old Man Kwan, who handled cargo. Young Somi, who was only 22 and had joined the crew just 3 months ago. The others were in their quarters, probably terrified. Gina had promised herself she would keep them safe. She had left the military to escape from death. But death had found her anyway, wearing silver armor and speaking with a cold voice. "Done," Dahyun said suddenly. "Mining laser is online and ready. But Captain, I have to warn you. This laser is designed to cut through rock, not warships. I don't know if it will do anything to them." "It will do something," Gina said. "That's all I need." She opened the channel one more time. "Valoran vessel, I have the code. I am transmitting it now." "Excellent. You have chosen wisely. Prepare for boarding." Gina smiled. It was not a friendly smile. "Actually," she said, "I changed my mind." She pressed the firing button. The mining laser was not meant for combat. It was a tool designed to slice asteroids into manageable pieces. It fired a concentrated beam of superheated particles that could cut through solid rock, like a knife through paper. The beam hit the Valoran ship directly in its engine section. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the silver hull began to glow red, then orange, then white. The alien ship shuddered. Explosions rippled across its surface. The engines, which had been glowing with blue light, went dark. The Stardust crane shook from the force of the blast. Alarms started screaming. Dahyun shouted something about power levels. But Gina kept her eyes on the screen. The Valoran ship was drifting now, dead in space. Its beautiful silver hull was scarred with a massive hole where the engines used to be. Emergency lights flickered across its surface. Gina opened the channel again. Her voice was calm and cold. "Valoran vessel. This is Captain Park Gina. We were just here to mine rocks. We did not want trouble, but you pointed weapons at my ship. You threatened my crew. You called us primitive." She paused, letting the words sink in. "We are not primitive. We are human. And we do not surrender." She cut the channel and turned to Dahyun. "Get us out of here. Maximum speed. What about them?" Dahyun asked, pointing at the crippled alien ship. "They can wait for rescue. Or they can die. I don't care which." "I don't care which." The Stardust crane turned and limped away into the darkness of space. Its hull was damaged. Its power levels were critical. But it was alive. Behind them, the Valoran survivors sent a message home. It was the first report of its kind in the long history of the Valoran Empire. For over 300 years, they had conquered species across the galaxy. Every single one had surrendered when faced with Valoran light. Every single one had accepted their fate until now. The report was short and urgent. It said, "Encountered species designated human. Attempted standard acquisition. Ship destroyed by improvised weapon. Recommend extreme caution. Humans do not surrender. Repeat, humans do not surrender. Awaiting further instructions." The message traveled across the stars, reaching the Valoran High Council within days. The council members read it with confusion, then with disbelief, then with something they had not felt in centuries. Feared. In a quiet office on the Valoran homeworld, a senior commander added a new entry to the official species database. Under the section for Recommended Contact Protocol, he typed 4 words that would eventually spread across the entire galaxy. "Do not engage humans." He stared at the words for a long moment. Then he added one more line. "Under any circumstances." The doctrine of overwhelming force. 6 months had passed since the incident near the Kepler belt. 6 months since a small mining ship had crippled Valoran's scout vessel with nothing but a modified laser. 6 months since the first crack had appeared in the perfect record of Valoran conquest. The High Council had spent those months arguing about what to do. Some said the incident was a fluke, a lucky shot by a desperate crew. Others said it was a sign of something dangerous, something that needed to be destroyed before it could spread dot in the end. The Council chose overwhelming force. It was the Valoran way. When a problem appeared, you crushed it completely. You made an example. You ensured that no one would ever think of resisting again. Admiral Yethris was chosen to lead the mission. He was old, experienced, and utterly confident. He had conquered 30 worlds in his career. He had never lost a battle. He looked at the reports about humans and felt nothing but contempt. One ship got lucky, he told his officers. We will show them what happens when luck runs out. His fleet consisted of 40 warships. Each one was larger and more powerful than the scout vessel that had been destroyed. Each one carried enough firepower to reduce a planet to ash. It was more force than necessary for a species that had barely achieved interstellar travel. But Admiral Yethris believed in sending messages. And the message he wanted to send was simple: surrender or die. The target was Earth Defense Outpost Theta 7, a small station orbiting a moon in the outer colonies. It was a minor installation, home to only 200 humans. It had minimal defenses. It would fall in minutes. Or so Admiral Yethris believed. Commander Lee Suho stood in the control room of Theta 7, watching the Valoran fleet approach on his screen. His face was calm, but his hands were shaking slightly. He hid them behind his back so his crew would not see. He was 41 years old, a career military officer who had never seen real combat. He had trained for war his entire life, but he had never expected it to actually come. Now it was here, and he had 200 people looking to him for guidance. Beside him stood Corporal Bei Yuna, a young woman who had arrived at the station just 3 days ago. It was her first assignment after completing her training. She was 20 years old, with bright eyes that still believed in heroes and happy endings. Suho wondered if those eyes would look the same after today. He doubted it. "Sir," Yuna said, her voice trembling slightly. "They're hailing us. Put it through." The screen flickered, and Admiral Yethris appeared. He looked like all Valorans did, tall and thin with pale blue skin and large dark eyes. His uniform was covered in medals and symbols that meant nothing to humans. "Attention, human station," Yethris said. His voice was cold and bored, like someone ordering food at a restaurant. "You are surrounded by the Valoran Third Fleet. Resistance is not possible. Surrender immediately, and your crew will be processed humanely. Refuse, and you will all die. You have 5 minutes to decide." The channel closed. Suho stared at the blank screen. Around him, his crew was silent. He could feel their fear, thick and heavy in the air. "Sir," one of his officers said quietly, "what do we do?" Suho thought about his options. He had 8 defense turrets, 2 small patrol craft, 200 people, most of them engineers and technicians who had never fired a weapon in their lives, against 40 warships. The math was simple. There was no way to win. The logical choice was to surrender. Maybe the Valorans would keep their word. Maybe processing would not be as bad as it sounded. Maybe some of his people would survive. But Suho remembered the report about the mining ship. He remembered what Captain Park Gina had said before she fired. "We do not surrender." He made his decision. "Open a channel," he said. The screen flickered again. Admiral Yethris appeared, looking slightly impatient. "Have you made your choice?" Suho stood straight. He kept his voice steady. "Yes, we have decided to refuse your offer." Yethris blinked. For a moment, he looked confused, as if Suho had spoken in a language he did not understand. "Refuse?" He repeated, "You cannot refuse. You have no weapons capable of harming us. You have no reinforcements coming. Your position is hopeless. I understand that. Then why refuse?" Suho smiled. It was a grim smile, the smile of a man who had accepted his fate. Because you threatened my people. And where I come from, we do not let threats go unanswered." He paused, then spoke the words that would later become famous across the galaxy. "Come and take them." The channel closed. For a moment, there was complete silence on the station. Then Yuna spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "Commander? What do we do now?" Suho turned to face his crew. He saw fear on their faces. Fear and uncertainty and the knowledge that they were probably going to die. But he also saw something else. Something that looked like determination. "Now," he said, "we fight." The battle lasted 18 hours. It should have lasted 5 minutes. The Valorans attacked with confidence, expecting the station to fall immediately. Instead, they found themselves facing an enemy that would not stop fighting. The humans used the asteroid field around the moon as cover. They launched their patrol craft in suicide runs against Valoran ships. When one section of the station was breached, the survivors sealed it off and kept fighting from another section. Corporal Bayuna was trapped in a communications module when a Valoran missile hit it. The room began to lose air. She had maybe 10 minutes before she would suffocate. She spent those 10 minutes broadcasting tactical information to the rest of the station. She reported enemy positions, damage assessments, and weakness in the Valoran formations. Her voice remained calm and professional, even as the air grew thin. A rescue team reached her with 2 minutes to spare. She passed out the moment they opened the door. Still clutching her communication headset, Commander Lee Suho fought from the command center until it was destroyed. Then he fought from a maintenance corridor. Then from a storage room. He was wounded twice, but refused medical treatment. "Others need it more," he said. "I can still fight." By hour 16, the station was barely functional. Life support was failing. Ammunition was almost gone. More than half the crew was dead or wounded, but the Valarans were suffering too. Admiral Yethris watched in disbelief as his fleet was torn apart by an enemy that should have been helpless. The humans used tactics he had never seen before. They sacrificed themselves to create openings for others. They rigged damaged equipment as bombs. They fought in ways that made no logical sense. At hour 18, with only 12 ships remaining from his original 40, Yethris made a decision he had never made in his entire career. He ordered a retreat. As his damaged fleet limped away from Theta 7, he recorded his final report. His hands were shaking. His voice was hollow. "The human station has been neutralized," he said, though this was not entirely true. Theta 7 was damaged but still standing. However, losses were significant. Enemy tactics were unconventional and highly effective. He paused, struggling to find the right words. Humans do not fight like other species. They do not calculate odds. They do not weigh survival against resistance. They simply fight. And they keep fighting until they physically cannot continue. He took a deep breath. Strongly advise against further engagement. The cost of victory is too high. Repeat, do not engage humans. The cost is too high. Back on Theta 7, Commander Lee Suho sat in the ruins of his command center, surrounded by exhausted survivors. They had won. Against all odds, against all logic, they had won. But the cost had been terrible. 112 people were dead. The station would take months to repair. Corporal Bayuna approached him, bandages covering her arms where she had been cut by flying debris. Her eyes were different now. The brightness was gone, replaced by something harder, something older. "Commander," she said. "They're retreating." Suho nodded slowly. He was too tired to feel happy. Too tired to feel anything. "Good," he said quietly. "Let them run. Let them tell everyone what happened here." He looked out at the stars, at the fleeing Valoran ships growing smaller in the distance. Let them tell the galaxy what happens when you threaten humans. The Whisper Network 2. Years had passed since the Battle of Theta 7. 2 years since a small human station had broken a Valoran war fleet. 2 years since the galaxy had started paying attention to the strange species from the third planet of an unremarkable star. The story had spread like fire through dry grass. Smugglers told it in hidden ports. Refugees whispered it in crowded ships. Traders shared it over drinks in stations far from Valoran eyes. The details changed with each telling, growing larger and more dramatic. But the core remained the same. The humans had fought. The humans had won. The humans had not surrendered. For most species in the galaxy, this was impossible to understand. The Valoran Empire had ruled for over 300 years. They had conquered more than 200 star systems. Every species that had faced them had eventually submitted. It was simply what happened. The Valorans had better technology, better weapons, more ships. Fighting them was like fighting a storm. You could not win. You could only survive by bending. But the humans had not bent. And that single fact changed everything. Ambassador Choi Minho had been stationed on Nexus Prime for 8 months. Nexus Prime was a massive trading hub in neutral space, a place where species from across the galaxy came to do business. It was officially independent, which meant the Valorans did not control it directly. They did not need to. Their influence was everywhere, invisible but heavy. Like pressure in deep water. My NHO was 38 years old. A career diplomat who had spent most of his life negotiating trade agreements and settling minor disputes. He was not a soldier. He was not a hero. He was just a man with a talent for listening and a face that made people want to talk to him. Lately, people had been talking to him a lot. It started with small things. An alien merchant who asked about human history. A diplomat who wanted to know about human military tactics. A refugee who simply wanted to shake his hand and say thank you. Minho did not understand at first. Then his assistant explained it to him. "They've heard the stories," Han Yunji said. She was an intelligence officer, officially listed as Minho's administrative assistant. In reality, she was there to gather information and keep him safe. About the mining ship. About Theta 7. You're not just an ambassador anymore. You're a symbol. A symbol of what? Yunji smiled slightly. Hope. Minho found that hard to believe. He was just one man, representing a species that most of the galaxy had never heard of until recently. Humans were newcomers to interstellar space. They had no great fleets, no advanced technology, no vast empire. They were small and weak compared to powers like the Valorans. But weakness, he was learning, was relative. The first real contact came 3 weeks later. A delegation from a species called the Morath arrived at his office late at night. They were small creatures, barely reaching Minho's waist, with large eyes and nervous hands. Their homeworld had been conquered by the Valorans 2 centuries ago. They had been servants ever since. "We want to know how you did it," their leader said. His name was Telek, and his voice trembled as he spoke. "How did you defeat them? What weapons do you have?" Minho looked at Yunji. She nodded slightly, giving him permission to speak freely. "We do not have special weapons," Minho said honestly. "Our technology is not better than theirs. In many ways, it is worse." Telek's large eyes blinked in confusion. "Then how? How did you survive?" Minho thought about the question for a long moment. How do you explain something that feels so natural that you never even noticed it? "We refused to stop," he finally said. "Even when we were losing. Even when the situation was hopeless. We kept fighting. Not because we thought we could win, but because surrender was worse than death." Telek stared at him. That is madness." "Maybe," Minho agreed. "But it worked." He leaned forward, his voice growing softer. "The Valorans are powerful. But their power depends on one thing, everyone believing they cannot be beaten. The moment that belief breaks, their power starts to crumble. You do not need better weapons. You need to stop being afraid. Telek was silent for a long time. Then he spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. Can you teach us? Can you show us how to stop being afraid? Minho did not know how to answer that question. He was not a teacher. He was not a warrior. He was just a diplomat who had stumbled into something much larger than himself. But Yoonji answered for him. Yes, she said. We can try. Over the following months, Minho and Yoonji began sharing information with species who sought them out. They did not give weapons. They did not provide military support. Earth was still recovering from Theta 7 and could not afford to start a galactic war. Instead, they shared ideas, the concept of total war, where an entire society mobilizes for conflict. The idea that surrender is a choice, not an inevitability. Historical examples from human history. Small nations that had resisted larger powers. Guerrilla fighters who had outlasted occupying armies. Movements that had overcome tyranny through sheer persistence. Your problem is not strength, Minho told delegation after delegation. Your problem is that you have forgotten how to resist. You have accepted Valaran rule as permanent, like gravity or death. But empires are not natural laws. They are built by people. And anything built by people can be torn down. The words spread. The whispers grew louder. Within a year, 3 Valaran-occupied systems experienced uprisings. The rebellions were small at first, just protests and acts of sabotage. But they grew, and they spread. The rebels called themselves the Awakened. They used human symbols on their flags. They quoted human phrases in their communications. "We do not surrender," became their battle cry. The Valaran Council watched these developments with growing alarm. They sent troops to crush the rebellions, but for every uprising they stopped, 2 more appeared elsewhere. It was like trying to hold water in their hands. The harder they squeezed, the more slipped through their fingers. This is not a military problem, one council member warned. This is an idea, and you cannot kill an idea with weapons. But the council did not listen. They had ruled through force for 3 centuries. Force was all they knew. On Nexus Prime, Ambassador Choi Minho received reports of the spreading unrest. He felt a strange mixture of pride and fear. Pride because humanity had inspired something wonderful. Fear because he knew what would come next. The Valorans would not accept this challenge quietly. They would strike back. And when they did, their target would be obvious. They're going to come for Earth, Eunji said one evening, stating aloud what they both already knew. Minho nodded slowly. Yes, they have to. We started this. We are the source of the infection, from their perspective. They will try to cut it out at the root. Can we stop them? Minho looked out the window at the stars. Somewhere out there, countless species were waking up from centuries of sleep. They were learning to hope again. They were learning to fight again, because of humanity. Because a mining captain had refused to surrender. Because a station commander had said, "Come and take them." "I don't know," he admitted. "But I know we have to try. We told the galaxy that surrender is a choice. Now we have to prove it." He turned back to Yoonji, and his eyes were hard with determination. "Send a message to Earth. Tell them to prepare. The Valarans are coming. And this time, they won't send 40 ships. They'll send everything they have." Eunji nodded and began typing. The message flew across the stars, carrying a warning and a promise. The war for humanity's survival was about to begin. The siege of Earth, the Valaran Council, had spent months preparing for this moment. They had gathered ships from every corner of their empire. They had pulled forces from occupied territories, leaving only skeleton crews behind. They had emptied their reserves, their training academies, their defensive fleets. The result was the largest armada ever assembled in Valoran history. 2,047 warships, each one capable of destroying a small moon. At the center of the fleet sat the flagship Eternal Dominion, a vessel so large it had its own gravity. On its bridge stood Supreme Commander Valeth, the most decorated officer in the Empire. She was young for her position, only 60 years old in Valoran terms. But she had earned her rank through brilliance and ruthlessness. She had crushed rebellions on a dozen worlds. She had never known failure. "Set course for the Sol System," she ordered. Maximum speed. The fleet moved like a single creature, thousands of ships flowing through space in perfect formation. They traveled for weeks, crossing the vast darkness between stars. As they approached their target, Valeth reviewed the intelligence reports for the 100th time. Earth, a small blue planet, third from an ordinary yellow star. Home to 8 billion humans, the species that had caused so much trouble. The source of the infection that was spreading through her empire. Today, she would end it. General Kang Ji-woo stood in the command center of Earth's unified defense network. He was 63 years old, a veteran of countless training exercises, but no real wars. Humans had not fought a major conflict among themselves in over a century. They had forgotten what real war looked like. Now they were about to remember. How many? He asked his aide. "Over 2,000 confirmed ships, sir. More arriving every hour." Ji-woo closed his eyes. He had known this was coming. They had all known. But knowing and seeing were different things. The Valoran fleet was so large that it blocked out the stars. It was like watching a shadow swallow the sky. Earth's defenses were impressive by human standards. 12 orbital platforms, 300 defense satellites, a fleet of 200 warships. But against 2,000 Valoran vessels, it was like throwing rocks at an ocean. What are our options? Ji-woo asked, though he already knew the answer. "We can't win," his strategic officer said bluntly. "Not in a direct fight. If we engage their fleet head-on, we'll be destroyed in hours. Then we don't fight head-on." Ji-woo opened a channel to all defense forces. His voice was calm and steady, the voice of a man who had made peace with what was coming. "This is General Kang Ji-woo. As you all know, the Valoran fleet has arrived. They outnumber us roughly 10 to 1. By any normal calculation, we should surrender." He paused, letting the words sink in. "But we are not going to surrender. We cannot win this battle through strength. But we can make victory cost them more than they are willing to pay. Every ship we destroy is one less ship to threaten other worlds. Every day we hold out is another day for our allies to prepare. We fight not because we can win, but because fighting is right." He took a deep breath. "Remember Theta 7. Remember the Stardust Crane. We are human. We do not give up. Now let's show these invaders why the galaxy learned to fear us." The battle began at dawn, though dawn meant nothing in space. The Valoran fleet advanced in a massive wave, expecting to overwhelm Earth's defenses quickly. Instead, they found themselves facing an enemy that seemed to be everywhere at once. The humans used Earth's moon as cover, hiding ships in its shadow and striking at exposed Valoran flanks. They used the asteroid belt to set ambush, luring enemy vessels into killing zones. They turned civilian mining ships into weapons, ramming them into Valoran cruisers in suicide attacks. By the end of the first day, the Valorans had lost 50 ships. A small number compared to their total force, but far more than they had expected. By the end of the first week, they had lost 200. Supreme Commander Valeth watched. Her fleet shrank and felt something she had never experienced before: doubt. "They're not fighting like a military," she said to her officers. "They're fighting like animals. No tactics, no strategy, just pure aggression. Every time we think we have them cornered, They attack from a different direction. Should we withdraw? One officer asked nervously. No. Valeth's voice was hard as iron. We came here to end the human threat. If we retreat now, we show the entire galaxy the humans can be victorious. Every conquered world will rise up. Our empire will crumble. We must win here, no matter the cost. On Earth, the situation was desperate. The orbital platforms had fallen one by one. The moonbase was destroyed. Casualties were mounting into the millions. Cities were being evacuated. People were fleeing underground into bunkers and caves. Anywhere they might survive, what was coming. Dr. Shin Hyung sat in a bunker beneath the Korean peninsula, surrounded by screens and computers. She was 45 years old, a physicist who had spent the last decade working on a project so secret that fewer than 100 people knew it existed. Project Prometheus. The project had started as a theoretical exercise. What would happen if you attached a faster-than-light drive to a simple metal rod? The answer was terrifying. The rod would arrive at its target before anyone could see it coming, moving at speeds that made nuclear weapons look like toys. It was the ultimate weapon. And Hyung had spent 10 years building a network of them, hidden throughout the solar system, waiting for a day she had hoped would never come. That day was here. General, she said into her communicator, Project Prometheus is ready. On the command deck, Jiwoo received the message. He closed his eyes for a moment, saying a silent prayer for what he was about to do. Activate it, he ordered. Throughout the solar system, hidden platforms came to life. They were small, easily missed, disguised as asteroid mining equipment or defunct satellites. Each one contained a single weapon, a tungsten rod the size of a telephone pole, attached to a compact FTL drive. 100 platforms, 100 rods, 100 chances to change the course of the battle. Hyung input the targeting data. Her hands were shaking. These weapons had never been tested in combat. If they failed, humanity would fall. If they worked, hundreds of thousands of Valorans would die in an instant. She pressed the button. For a moment, nothing happened. Then space itself seemed to scream. The rods appeared among the Valoran fleet without warning, moving so fast they were invisible. Each impact released energy equivalent to a small nuclear explosion. Ships vanished in flashes of light. Chain reactions spread as damaged vessels collided with their neighbors. Supreme, Commander Valeth watched in horror as 400 of her ships disappeared in less than a minute. The flagship shook as debris bounced off its shields. Alarms screamed. Officers shouted, "What was that?" She demanded, "What weapon is that?" No one had an answer. No one had ever seen anything like it. On Earth, Hyun collapsed into her chair, tears streaming down her face. It had worked. Against all odds, it had worked. But she felt no joy. Only exhaustion and grief. Thought she had just killed hundreds of thousands of living beings. She would carry that weight forever. General Jiwoo watched the tactical display. The Valoran fleet was in chaos. Ships were scattering, trying to avoid the phantom weapons that had struck from nowhere. Their perfect formation had shattered like glass. All forces, he ordered. Attack, now, while they're confused. Give them no time to recover. The human fleet surged forward, every remaining ship joining the assault. It was a desperate gamble, throwing everything they had at a wounded enemy. But it was their only chance. The battle raged for 3 more days. Both sides suffered terrible losses. Earth's fleet was reduced to less than 50 ships. But the Valoran armada was shattered, broken beyond repair. On the 19th day of the siege, Supreme Commander Valeth made the decision that had haunted 2 Valoran commanders before her. She ordered the retreat. 847 ships limped away from Earth, all that remained of the mightiest fleet ever assembled. Behind them, A battered planet celebrated its survival. In her final report, Valith wrote words that would echo through history. The humans have won. Not through superior technology or numbers, but through a quality I cannot name. They do not fight for victory. They fight because fighting is who they are. Every attempt to break them only makes them stronger. Every loss only makes them more determined. I recommend immediate and total cessation of hostilities against the human species. Further conflict will only result in our own destruction. She paused, then added one final line. We came to teach them fear. Instead, they taught us. The new galactic order. 5 years had passed since the siege of Earth. 5 years since humanity had done the impossible. 5 years since the galaxy had watched a small blue planet stand against the mightiest empire in known space and refuse to fall. The universe looked very different now. President Yunsira stood at the podium of the newly built Galactic Coalition Hall on Nexus Prime. The building was enormous, designed to hold representatives from hundreds of species. Today, it was full. Delegates from every corner of the galaxy had come to witness this moment. She was 52 years old, with gray streaks in her black hair and lines around her eyes that had not been there 5 years ago. The war had aged her, as it had aged everyone who had lived through it. But her voice was strong as she began to speak. Distinguished representatives, honored guests, friends. She paused, looking out at the sea of faces before her. Some were familiar, humanoid shapes with different colored skin or unusual features. Others were strange, alien in ways that still surprised her after years of diplomatic work. But all of them were here for the same reason. 5 years ago, humanity faced extinction. A fleet of 2,000 warships came to our home with one purpose: to erase us from existence. They believed we were too dangerous to live. They believed that our refusal to surrender made us a threat that had to be eliminated. She took a breath. They were right. A murmur ran through the crowd. Sira continued, "We are dangerous, not because of our weapons or our technology. We are dangerous because we showed the galaxy something it had forgotten. We showed that empires can fall. We showed that the strong can be defeated by the determined. We showed that hope is more powerful than fear." She gestured to the assembled delegates. "Look around this room. 20 years ago, most of the species represented here were subjects of the Valoran Empire. They had no voice, no freedom, no future except service. Today, they sit as equals in a coalition of free worlds. Today, they speak with their own voices. Today, they decide their own destinies." Her voice grew softer, more personal. "We did not seek this war. We did not want to become warriors. We were miners and farmers and teachers and builders. We wanted to explore the stars in peace. But when someone threatens your home, your family, your right to exist, you do not calculate odds. You fight. That is what it means to be human." In a quiet room elsewhere in the station, a very different conversation was taking place. Former Supreme Commander Valith sat across a table from a team of human historians. She was thin now, her once proud posture bent by 5 years of imprisonment and reflection. But her eyes were still sharp, still intelligent, still trying to understand the species that had destroyed everything she had known. "Tell us," the lead historian said, "from your perspective. What went wrong?" Valith was silent for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was soft, almost defeated. "We made a mistake. A fundamental error that we never recognized until it was too late." "What error?" "We assumed humans were like every other species we had encountered. We assumed they would calculate their chances, weigh the odds, and choose the logical path. Every other species did. When faced with overwhelming force, they surrendered. It was rational. It made sense. She shook her head slowly. But humans do not think that way. For humans, there are things more important than survival. There are things they will die to prevent, and things they will kill to protect. We thought we understood violence. We thought we were the predators, and everyone else was prey. We were wrong. The historian leaned forward. What do you think makes humans different? Valith considered the question carefully. I have had 5 years to think about this. I have read human history. I have studied your wars, your revolutions, your struggles. And I think I finally understand. She met the historian's eyes. Every other species in the galaxy evolved as prey. Millions of years of running from predators, of hiding, of surviving through caution and submission. When danger comes, their instinct is to flee or submit. It is written in their genes. But humans? Humans evolve differently. Your ancestors were not prey. They were hunters. Pack hunters who worked together to bring down creatures larger and stronger than themselves. When danger comes, your instinct is not to run. Your instinct is to fight. To stand with your pack. To protect what is yours. She paused. We thought we were predators facing prey. We did not realize we were predators facing other predators. And when predators fight, both sides bleed. The documentary crew recorded everything. They knew this footage would be watched by billions across the galaxy. The words of the fallen commander would teach future generations what happens when you underestimate humanity. Far from the politics and the history lessons. On a small station in the asteroid belt, an old woman was getting ready for work. Park Gina, now 61 years old, stood on the bridge of the Stardust Crane 2. Her hair was gray, her face lined with wrinkles, but her eyes still held the same sharp intelligence they had held 27 years ago when she had burned a hole through a Valoran scout ship with a mining laser. She had been offered everything. Command of fleets, political positions, a comfortable retirement on Earth with all the honors a grateful species could provide. She had turned it all down. I'm a miner, she had told the officials who came to give her medals. I was a miner before all this started, and I'll be a miner when it's over. That's who I am. A granddaughter, a young woman named Gina like her grandmother, was visiting the ship. She was 20 years old, born after the war, raised in a galaxy that had never known Valoran dominance. Grandmother, she asked, why don't you stay on Earth? Accept the honors? Enjoy your retirement? You've earned it. Gina smiled, the same grim smile she had worn when she faced down the Valoran scout ship so many years ago. Because being human isn't about glory, little one. It isn't about medals or speeches or being famous. Being human is about doing your job, taking care of your people, and getting back to work when the crisis is over. She looked out at the stars through the bridge window. Somewhere out there, the Valoran Empire was still recovering from its wounds. Somewhere out there, countless species were building new lives as free people. Somewhere out there, the galaxy was changing in ways no one could predict. We showed the galaxy that we could fight, she said quietly. Now we need to show them that we can build, that we can create, that we're not just warriors. We're humans, and humans do everything. Young Gina nodded slowly, beginning to understand. In databases across the galaxy, a warning had been programmed into the first contact protocols of every spacefaring species. It had been written by Valoran scientists after careful study of their devastating defeat. It had been adopted by every other civilization as a matter of simple survival. The entry was simple and direct. Species: human Homo sapiens origin. Sol system: planet Earth threat level. Maximum RCO action. Do not engage under any circumstances. Additional notes: they do not surrender. They do not forget. They do not stop. If conflict is unavoidable, consider the following. Is your objective worth the extinction of your species? If no, withdraw immediately. If yes, you are wrong. Withdraw anyway. Final warning. Humans are not the most technologically advanced species in the galaxy. They are not the strongest or the fastest or the most numerous. But they possess something more dangerous than any weapon, an absolute refusal to accept defeat. They will sacrifice everything to protect what they love. They will fight until their last breath. They will inspire others to do the same. Do not make them your enemy. There is no victory against humans. There is only survival. In the newly formed Galactic Coalition, President Yoon Sira finished her speech to thunderous applause. Ambassador Choi Min-ho, now white-haired and respected throughout known space, stood among the delegates and allowed himself a small smile. Commander Lee Suho, retired and walking with a cane from old wounds, watched the ceremony on a screen in his small apartment on Earth. Dr. Shin Hyung, her conscience still troubled by the weapon she had created, worked at a university teaching young scientists about the responsibility that comes with power. And in the asteroid belt, Park Gina fired up the engines of her mining ship and got back to work. The galaxy had learned to fear humanity. Now it was time to teach them something else. Humans were not just fighters. They were builders, dreamers, creators. And they were just getting started.